The signal came from a planet that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. That was what the tactical officer said. Tess stood at his console, his four-jointed shoulders hunched, his amber sensor eye flickering as it processed the void where Kepler 442b should have been. The Kepler Drift had been silent for 11 days. Not empty silent. The kind of silence that follows a scream. Fleet Primarch Oren Kale did not look up from his report. He was 847 years old, and he had ordered 4 sterilizations. This was supposed to be routine. "The stations are gone," Tess said. "The moons are cold, but the debris field is wrong." Kale's 6 fingers tightened on the armrest of his command chair. The chair was carved from the hull of his first conquered vessel, the **Ashdrinker**, and it smelled of ozone and old victories. "Wrong how? There should be more." Tess turned, and his tactical sensor caught the bridge light like a second sun. 7 stations, 2 terraformed moons, 3 million people. The math doesn't leave this little behind. Kale stood. He was 2.3 meters of bone plate and ceremonial armor, and when he moved, the deck groaned. He crossed to the observation deck and looked out at the pale blue gas giant turning slowly beyond the viewport, casting long shadows across his fleet. "Primitives do not have deep space evacuation," he said. "They never do." But the silence was wrong, not empty wrong, the kind of wrong that follows a scream. "I wish I could tell you it ended there. It didn't. Stay close." 3 days earlier, the **Ashdrinker** had not been in the drift. It had been in the Voreth Dominion's central staging yard, 400 light-years from anything human, and Kale had been composing a letter to his superiors about the strategic value of silence. The bridge of the **Ashdrinker* was carved from black asteroid iron, 3 kilometers of hull, air thick with ozone, and the sweet chemical tang of recyclers at capacity. Kale's weapons officer, Jorvek, cracked his knuckles before every shift, a Strestel Kale found undignified in a creature of 400 years. The observation deck looked out on nothing but docked destroyers and the pale glow of maintenance lights. "Directive 9 Alpha," Kale said, not looking up from his tablet. "Kepler Drift, repositioning of 3.2 million, standard protocol." Thess's sensor eye dimmed. "Standard protocol," he repeated. "Your first sterilization, Officer Thess. You will find it efficient. The humans have no deep space capability. They will not resist. They never resist." Kale had seen 11 worlds subdued. He had watched species beg, bargain, and burn. Humans, in his experience, did something worse. They were quiet. They filed complaints. They sent diplomatic notes through the conquered bureaucracy. They did not fight because they had learned over 300 years of membership that the conquered did not reward fighters. It rewarded the patient. The patient were easy to sterilize. A junior officer approached. "Primarch. The Kavani ambassador requests an audience." Kale waved a hand. "Elder superstition, not a military concern." "She has requested an audience 47 times in the past year, sir. She says it is about the humans." "Then let her speak to the humans." "She says they will not speak to her. She says they have not spoken to anyone in 47 years. Kale turned. His tactical sensor glowed amber. 47 years. "Since the Kuiper fabrication yards began operations, sir. The Kavani believe the yards are not building colony ships." Kale laughed. It sounded like gravel in a gearbox. "The Kavani believe comets are omens. Dismiss her." The junior officer hesitated. "She is standing in the bridge shadows, sir. She has been there for an hour." Kale looked. In the corner of the observation deck, where the maintenance lights did not reach, stood a figure of frail, elongated limbs and translucent skin. Vein patterns shifted beneath her face like weather maps of a dying world. She was rubbing something between her palms, a small, worn object that caught no light. "Ambassador Yirth Saul," Kale said, "you are trespassing on a military vessel." "I am witnessing," Yirth said. Her voice was dry precision, detached sorrow, the sound of a library burning in slow motion. As I have witnessed for 312 years, as I warned your predecessors for 47. Warned them of what? That the humans were not building colony ships in the dark. Kale turned back to the viewport. The humans are quiet members of the conquered. They have been quiet for 300 years. Quiet is weakness, Ambassador. Weakness is not a warning, it is a diagnosis. Yirth stepped forward. The vein patterns in her face pulsed red, then white, then settled into a pale blue that Kale did not recognize. The Silence Charter, she said, signed by 6 species, Vali, Valith, Fenari, Balasi, Tessari, Corvati. Each lost something 47 years ago. Each has kept the secret because each had a reason to fear what they saw. I do not recognize this charter. You would not, it was not filed with the conquered, it was filed with the dark. Yirth opened her hand. The object between her palms was a data crystal worn smooth by 19 years of rubbing. I failed to save a colony once. The humans remember. I do not know if they forgive, but I know they build. And I know they listen. Kale did not answer. He had already stopped listening. He was thinking of the letter he would write, the efficiency report he would file, the 3.2 million who would be repositioned and forgotten, because the conquered had 4,000 species and no patience for the quiet ones. He did not know that 12,000 kilometers away, in the shadow of a rogue planet that did not appear on Dominion charts, a man was sitting in a command chair on a vessel that did not exist. Commander Silas Wren was 44 years old. He had spent 23 years in the silent service, and his left hand was prosthetic. A training accident at the Kepler yards, 11 years ago, when a fabrication arm had sheared through the bone before the safety protocols engaged. He did not remember the pain. He remembered the sound of the alarm, which was not an alarm at all but a soft chime, because loud noises carried in vacuum. The ring on his right thumb caught the dim bridge light as his hand moved across the console. A thin band of copper, sized for a child, worn smooth by 11 years of worry. It was the only thing on the bridge that was not matte black. Fabrication report, Lieutenant Okonkwo said. She was 31, sharp-featured, sharp-tongued, and she had been with Wren for 6 years. She did not know his daughter's name. She knew he grew chamomile in the hydroponics bay and offered it to everyone. She always declined. Yard 7, Wren said. Hull plating on schedule, how's the tea? Cold like always. Drink it anyway. She didn't, she never did. But she held the cup, and that was enough. Wren looked at the viewport. There was nothing to see. The Kepler yards operated in the shadow of rogue planets, where no starlight reached and no sensor pulse returned. The yards had been operational for 47 years, 12,000 workers, 8 shipyards rotating in the dark. The conquered believed they built colony ships. Wren touched the ring. It was warm. It had always been warm. Commander, Okonkwo said, the drift went silent 8 days ago. Dominion fleet confirmed in system. Directive 9 Alpha. Wren's hand stopped on the console. The ring caught the light and held it. How many? All of them, every station, every moon. She paused. They called it repositioning. Wren looked at his prosthetic hand. He looked at the copper ring. He thought of a girl on Titan who believed her father built colony equipment. He thought of 3.2 million names he had never met, but had spent 47 years learning to carry. Open a channel, he said. Wideband all frequencies. Sir, the Silence Charter is broken. Wren stood. The ring caught the light one more time, and then his hand was a fist. They counted what was in front of them. They never learned to count what waits in the dark. The asterisk Ashdrinker dropped out of warp 12 million kilometers from the drift's edge. Kale stood at the observation deck, his ceremonial armor catching the pale blue of the gas giant, and watched his fleet assemble. 312 vessels. The 9th expansion fleet. the largest concentration of Dominion power in this sector in 900 years. Sterilization report, he said. Directive 9 Alpha complete. 3.2 million repositioned. 0 resistance logged. Thess stood at his console, his sensor eye flickered. Primarch, the absence of escape vectors is anomalous. Even primitives leave something, a shuttle, a distress beacon, a body. Perhaps they evacuated to the moons. The moons are cold, sir. Surface temperature consistent with atmospheric venting. They did not evacuate, they did not leave. They simply stopped. Cale turned. For the first time in 847 years, something like doubt crossed his face. It was a small thing, a twitch of the bone plates above his tactical sensor, but Yirth saw it. She was still standing in the shadows. She was still rubbing her data crystal. "You should look at the debris field, Primarch," she said. "I have looked." "No, you have counted. There is a difference." Cale walked to Thess's console. The tactical officer stepped aside, his four-jointed shoulders folding inward like a creature trying to make itself small. The screen showed the drift, dust, ice, the ruins of human industry. 7 stations, 2 moons, 3.2 million repositioned. But the debris field was wrong. Not too much, too little. Cale stared at the numbers. He had ordered 4 sterilizations, and every time the debris had been vast. Shattered hulls, venting atmosphere, the bright, brief fires of resistance. This was different. This was clean. This was the work of something that had not fought because it had not needed to. Or something that had already finished fighting before the fleet arrived. Primarch Thess said. His voice was different now, younger. "I am picking up a contact, 400 meters off the port bow. No heat signature, no drive emission, no registry beacon." Cale looked up. The viewport showed nothing but stars and the pale gas giant. "Magnify." The screen resolved. A vessel. 2.4 kilometers of matte black hull, absorbing the starlight, absorbing the sensor pulses, absorbing everything that touched it. It had no lights, no markings visible at this distance. It simply hung in the void, silent as a grave and just as patient. "What is it?" Cale asked. "I don't know, sir. Our systems cannot classify it. The hull is..." Thess stopped. His sensor eye dimmed to a pinprick of amber. "The hull is absorbing our active scans, not deflecting, consuming. Nothing that touches it returns a signal." Cale felt something cold in his chest. It was not fear. He did not know fear. It was the sensation of a calculation error, a variable he had not accounted for, a species he had filed under quiet that had suddenly become something else. "Open a channel," he said. "All frequencies, identify that vessel." Thess worked his console. His 6 fingers moved in patterns Cale had never seen, urgent and unpracticed. "No response, sir. But Primarch, I am picking up a transmission, not from the vessel, from inside our own bandwidth. Someone is using our frequencies." "Trace it." "I can't, it's coming from everywhere. It's..." Thess stopped again. He looked at Cale, and for the first time in 127 years, the young officer's face showed something Cale could not name. "It's coming from the vessel, sir, but it's not directed at us. It's directed at everything, every conquered frequency, every civilian channel, every diplomatic band." Cale turned to the viewport. The black vessel hung in the void, patient and terrible. Then the voice came. It was human, quiet, measured, the voice of a man who had spent 23 years learning not to be heard. "This is the hollow," it said. "Stand by." And across the bridge of the ****, every console went dark. Not dead, waiting. The kind of waiting that follows a truth too large to argue with. Yirth stepped from the shadows. Her translucent skin glowed faintly in the emergency lighting, her vein patterns pulsing in rhythms that matched no emotion Cale had ever catalogued. She was not afraid. She was not relieved. She was something worse. She was right. You should look at its hull, Primarch, she said. Kale looked. The vessel's skin was no longer matte black. It was covered in markings, registry numbers, colony designations, names of places that no longer existed. Kepler 442b, Proxima Station, New Lagos, the Belt. 3.2 million names etched into the skin of a ghost. And beneath them, in smaller letters, in the human alphabet that Kale had never bothered to learn. We were listening. For 47 years we were listening. Kale's tactical sensor glowed amber. It did not stop glowing. He stood at the observation deck, 2.3 meters of bone plate and conquered hulls, and felt the weight of a silence he had never learned to hear. What happens now? He asked. But Yirth was already looking past him, past the fleet, past the 312 vessels that suddenly seemed very small against the dark. She was looking at the void where the black vessel hung, and she was rubbing her data crystal, and she was waiting for the galaxy to catch up. Because the Hollow had not fired a weapon. It had simply turned on the lights. And in the darkness beyond, something else was stirring. The darkness on the bridge of the asterisk Ashdrinker lasted 7 seconds, not dead darkness, waiting darkness, the kind of darkness that holds its breath. Then the screens returned, not to Dominion control, to a feed that Kale had never authorized, never seen, never imagined could exist. A face appeared, human, middle-aged, a prosthetic hand resting on a console, a copper ring catching the light. The man did not smile. He did not threaten. He simply looked into the camera as if he had been looking into it for 47 years, waiting for someone to finally meet his eyes. My name is Silas Wren, he said. I am the commander of a vessel that does not exist. For 47 years we have listened to your fleets, your orders, your sterilizations. We have recorded every name, every colony, every world you called repositioned. Kale's tactical sensor glowed amber. It did not stop. Trace that signal, he said to Thess. Find where he is broadcasting from. I can't, Primarch. The signal it's coming from everywhere. It's using our own quantum-entangled network. He's inside our communications. Then shut it down. I can't shut down our own network, sir. We'd be blind. Wren's voice continued, quiet and terrible in its calm. You counted what was in front of you. You never learned to count what waits in the dark. Today, we turn on the lights. The screen split, not into 2 images, into thousands, registry files, colony designations, names, faces. A child on Proxima Station holding a drawing of a dog, a woman on New Lagos teaching a class, a man on the Belt laughing at something off camera. The 3.2 million, not a number, not repositioned, people. Each with a name, a habit, a moment caught in light before the dark took them. Kale felt something in his chest. It was not fear. It was the sensation of a door opening in a room he had believed was a wall. On the bridge of the Hollow, Wren touched the ring. It was warm. Lieutenant Okonkwo stood beside him, her hands steady on her console, her eyes on the broadcast feed. Coalition fleet standing by, she said. Volley destroyers at Jump Point Alpha, Valeth at Beta. The others are holding position. Good. Sir, the Voreth are scrambling fighters. Kale has ordered an attack posture. Wren looked at the viewport. The asterisk Ashdrinker hung 400 meters away, its hull lit by the pale gas giant, its weapons cycling up. He could see the names on his own hull reflected in the enemy's viewport. Kepler 442b, Proxima Station, New Lagos, the Belt, 3.2 million names. And beneath them, in smaller letters, the ones that mattered most. We were listening. Open the hull cameras, Wren said. Let them see the names. Let them read everyone. The Hollow's hull was no longer matte black. It was a ledger, a monument, a scream written in steel. The names covered every surface, etched deep enough to survive re-entry, deep enough to outlast the hull itself. Wren had approved every font. He had checked every spelling. He had spent 11 years making sure no one was forgotten. Okonkwo looked at the ring. Your daughter. She thinks I build colony equipment. Will she see this? I hope not, Ren paused. I hope she never has to know what I built. On the ****, Yirth Sol stepped forward. Her translucent skin glowed in the light of the broadcast, her vein patterns pulsing in colors that Kale had never seen. Not fear, not sorrow, something older, recognition. You should look at the names, Primarch, she said. Not the numbers, the names. Kale looked. The screen showed a girl, 7 years old. She was drawing with chalk on a metal floor. The image was dated 3 weeks before Directive 9 Alpha. The file name said, Asia, Proxima Station, liked animals. Kale turned away. This is propaganda, emotional manipulation. The conquered will not be swayed by. The conquered is already watching, Yirth said. On 4,000 worlds, 4,000 species are seeing what you did, not what you reported, what you did, the sterilization orders, the repositioning, the 11 million names you filed under strategic necessity. Kale's hands tightened on the railing. His ceremonial armor, forged from the hull of his first conquest, suddenly felt heavy, not with pride, with weight. 11 million. The humans have been listening for 47 years, Primarch. They did not build colony ships. They built witnesses. Thes's console chimed. The young officer looked up, his sensor eye dimmed to a whisper of amber. Primarch, I'm picking up additional contacts. Multiple vessels, same signature as the hollow, same hull type. Same, he stopped. Same names. How many? 38, sir. 38 vessels decloaking across 12 systems. They're not in formation. They're not attacking. They're just appearing. Kale looked at the viewport. The black vessel hung before him, patient and terrible. But beyond it, in the darkness between stars, other shapes were resolving. Matte black hulls. No lights, no heat, no registry. Each one covered in names. Each one silent as a grave. And around them, other ships. Volley destroyers with their feathered crews visible through viewports. Valith vessels pulsing with bioluminescent color, speaking in light patterns that Kale could not read. Fennery crystalline hulls catching distant starlight. Balassi amphibious craft, gill vents steaming in the cold. Tessari swarm ships, 12 bodies moving as one mind. Corvati broadcast vessels, their 8 wings spread wide, their harmonic frequencies already carrying the signal to the edges of known space. The silence charter had broken, not with a shot, with a light. Ren picked up his cup. The tea had gone cold. He drank it anyway. The ring caught the light. Begin the data payload, he said. Okonkwo's fingers moved across her console. Firing now. 47 years of intercepted Vorath communications. Every sterilization order. Every repositioning directive, every internal memo where they called it what it was. The Hollow's broadcast beam was not a weapon. It was a mirror. It showed the Dominion what it had done in its own words, in its own files, in the voices of its own officers. Kale's voice ordering Directive 9 Alpha. Kale's voice calling it efficiency. Kale's voice laughing about the quiet species that never fought back. On the ****, Jorvek lowered his weapon. Not in surrender, in comprehension. The 400-year-old weapons officer had cracked his knuckles before every sterilization, and now his hands were still. He looked at the screen. He looked at Kale. He looked at the names. Primarch, he said, what have we done? Kale did not answer. He was watching the broadcast on his own bridge, his own words played back to him, his own efficiency turned into evidence. The Dominion had existed for 9,000 years. The conquered had 4,000 species, and in 47 years of silence, one quiet species had built something that no fleet could destroy. A record. Yirth Sol stood at the observation deck. She was no longer rubbing her data crystal. She held it in her open palm, and the light of the broadcast made it glow like a small star. 19 years of failure. 47 years of warning. 312 years of watching civilizations rise and fall and never learn. The volley are transmitting, she said. Ambassador Dren, on conclave spire, she says. Yirth paused. Her vein patterns pulsed white, then gold, then settled into a pale blue that looked almost like peace. She says the silence charter is broken. The truth is not. Kale turned. For the first time in 847 years, he asked a question he did not know the answer to. What happens now? Yirth looked at the black vessels. She looked at the names. She looked at the human who had not raised his voice, who had simply turned on the lights and let the darkness speak for itself. Now, she said, the galaxy learns to count what it could not see. Ren touched the ring. It was warm. He thought of Titan. He thought of a girl who believed her father built colony equipment. He thought of 3.2 million names and the 11 million more on the payload, and the silence that came before all of them. He did not smile. He did not celebrate. He simply said, to no one in particular, you counted what was in front of you. You never learned to count what waits in the dark. On the screen, the broadcast continued. The names scrolled. The evidence played. The galaxy watched. And in the silence that followed each transmission, something new was growing. Not victory, not defeat. Witness. But Ren knew, as he looked at the 38 vessels surrounding the Dominion fleet, that this was not the end. The Voreth had 312 ships. The Hollow had 39. The Coalition had 47. The math did not matter. The math was never the point. The point was what came after the lights turned on. And as he watched Kale's fleet begin to break formation, not retreating, not surrendering, but simply stopping, as if the machinery of conquest had encountered a wall it could not see, Ren felt something cold in his own chest. Not doubt, not fear. The weight of a door opening. Because the broadcast had ended, the names had been shown, the evidence had been played. But the Hollow's hull cameras were still recording, and in the darkness beyond the 38 vessels, something else was moving. Something that had not been part of the plan. Something that had been listening longer than even the Hollow. Commander Okonkwo said. Her voice was different now. Tight, I'm picking up a signal. Not from the Coalition, not from the Dominion, from... She stopped. She looked at Ren. From the drift itself, from the debris field, something is alive out there. Ren stood. The ring caught the light and held it. Show me, he said. And the screen filled with static, and in the static a shape. Not a ship, not a station. A voice. Human, young female. Dad. The static cleared. A girl, 7 years old, drawing with chalk on a metal floor. Asia, Proxima Station, liked animals. She looked into the camera. She smiled. We knew you were coming, she said. We've been waiting in the dark like you taught us. And then the screen went black. Not dead, waiting. The kind of waiting that follows a truth too large to argue with. Ren's hand moved before his mind caught up. The prosthetic fingers hit the console and the static died. The screen stayed black, but the voice of a girl drawing with chalk on a metal floor, still echoed in the bridge's recycled air. Sir, Okonkwo's voice was tight. That was not in the payload. That was not in any file. Ren looked at his hand. The ring was warm. It had always been warm, but now it felt like a warning. Replay the signal, he said. I can't. It didn't register on any band. It was... Okonkwo stopped. She looked at her console, then at Ren. It was inside the hull. The voice came from inside the Hollow itself. On the ****, Kale stood at the observation deck and watched his fleet break. Not in battle, in comprehension. The 312 vessels that had followed him to the drift were drifting now, their weapons cold, their crews staring at screens that showed their own words turned against them. Thess approached. His sensory was dark. Primarch, The High Command is not responding. Our quantum channels are flooded. Every Dominion vessel in the sector is receiving the human broadcast. Then shut it down. We can't. The humans are using our own network. They built it into our communications 47 years ago. Every message we ever sent, they were listening. Every order, every sterilization, every test stopped. He was young. This was his first. Every name, sir, they have every name. Cale turned. His ceremonial armor caught the pale light of the gas giant, and for the first time in 847 years he looked small, not defeated, exposed. Primarch, Yirth Saul's voice came from the shadows. She was no longer rubbing her data crystal. She held it in both hands, and the vein patterns in her translucent skin pulsed in a rhythm that matched nothing Cale had ever seen. You asked what happens now. I will tell you. The Voreth Dominion has existed for 9,000 years. In 47 years of silence, the humans built a weapon that does not fire. It records, it remembers, and now it speaks. She stepped forward. The crystal in her hands glowed with the light of 19 years of failure. The Silence Charter was not a treaty of fear. It was a treaty of grief. 6 species, 6 losses. Each of us watched the humans build something in the dark, and each of us understood what it meant. Not war, not conquest, witness. The Vali lost a colony to your repositioning 47 years ago. They were the first to sign. The Valith lost their empathic chorus to Dominion expansion. They signed because they could not bear to sing alone. The Fenari, the Balasi, the Tessari, the Korvati, each had a reason to keep the secret, not because we feared the humans. Because we feared what would happen when the humans finally spoke. Cale looked at the black vessels. He looked at the names. He looked at the human who had not raised his voice. Why, he asked, why wait 47 years? Why build this monument and hide it? Yirth smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who had been right for too long. Because, she said, they knew you would not listen until you could not look away. Ren stared at the black screen. The voice had been Aisha's. He was certain. He had approved every name on the hull, checked every file, and that face, that 7-year-old face drawing with chalk, was burned into his memory. She had been on the first list, the first sterilization, the first name he had etched into the hollow skin. She was dead. She had been dead for 47 years. Commander, Okonkwo's voice was barely above a whisper. The hull sensors are picking up movement, not outside, inside, Deck 7, Section 12, hydroponics. Ren's hand stopped. The ring caught the light. That's where I grow the chamomile, he said. Sir, there's someone there, something. The cameras are dead, but the motion sensors. She stopped. She looked at Ren. It's small, human-sized, moving like a child. Ren stood. The command chair rose behind him, and the bridge was silent except for the hum of the consoles and the distant whisper of the recyclers. Lock down the bridge, he said. No one leaves, no one enters. I'll go alone. Sir. The ring, he said. He held up his hand. The copper band caught the light and held it. It's warm. It has always been warm, but when that voice spoke, he paused. He looked at the viewport, at the 38 vessels hanging in the void, at the coalition ships pulsing with light and color. It got warmer. The hydroponics bay smelled of dirt and memory. Ren pushed through the hatch and the air hit him, moist, green, the smell of growing things in a place where nothing should grow. The chamomile was in its rose, small and pale, the leaves he had chewed 1,000 times to make a joke no one laughed at. In the center of the bay, a figure stood. Small, human, a girl in a dress that might have been white once, now gray with dust and time. She was drawing on the metal floor with something that looked like chalk but glowed faintly in the dim light. Ren stopped. His prosthetic hand found the wall. The ring was burning now. Aisha, he said. The girl looked up. She was 7. She had always been 7. Her eyes were the color of old stars, and her smile was the smile of someone who had been waiting for a very long time. We knew you were coming, she said. Her voice was the same as on the broadcast. Young, clear, not afraid. We all knew, we've been here since the dark took us, waiting in the places you built for us. Ren's throat closed. He had spent 23 years in the silent service. He had built a vessel that did not exist. He had etched 3.2 million names into a hull and told himself it was justice. But this small figure in a gray dress, drawing with glowing chalk, was not justice. It was consequence. "What are you?" he asked. Aisha tilted her head. "We are what you made, the names you etched, the voices you recorded, the silence you carried. You built a monument, Commander. Monuments hold ghosts. We are the ghosts of your listening." She held up her drawing. It was not a dog, it was a ship. A matte black vessel with names covering its hull, and in the center of the drawing, a small circle of copper. "The ring," she said. "You wear it for her, the girl on Titan. The one who thinks you build colony equipment, but you built us. You built the hollow, and you built the dark we wait in." Ren looked at his hand. The ring was warm. It had always been warm, but now he understood why. It was not a gift from his daughter. It was a key, a beacon, a thing that connected the living to the dead, the builder to the built, the silence to the scream. "I don't understand," he said. Aisha smiled. She went back to her drawing. "You will, when the lights come all the way on, when the galaxy sees not just what the Voreth did, but what you did in response. When they understand that the hollow is not a weapon, it is a door." She looked up. Her eyes were not a child's eyes anymore. They were old, older than Kale, older than Yirth, older than the Dominion itself. "And doors," she said, "open both ways." On the **Ashdrinker**, the broadcast had stopped. The screens were dark. The crew stood at their stations, silent, waiting. Kale had not moved from the observation deck. He was watching the hollow, and the hollow was watching him. Then the lights came on. Not on the hollow, in the drift, in the debris field where 7 stations and 2 moons had been silent, where 3.2 million had been repositioned, where the silence had been wrong. The lights were small at first, pinpricks, then clusters, then constellations, thousands of them, millions. Tiny lights in the darkness, forming patterns, forming words, forming faces. Thes's console screamed. Primarch biological signatures, massive, everywhere. The drift is alive. Kale turned. His tactical sensor glowed amber, but it was not targeting. It was weeping. The light from the debris field was too bright, too many, too human. "What is it?" he asked. Yirth stepped beside him. She was not smiling. She was crying, and the tears on her translucent skin looked like stars. "It is the 3.2 million, she said. "It is the 11 million. It is every name the humans ever recorded. They did not build colony ships in the dark, Primarch. They built a network, a web, a place for the dead to wait." And now she looked at the lights, at the faces forming in the void, at the small girl in a gray dress drawing on the floor of a ship that did not exist. Now the dead are tired of waiting. Kale fell to his knees. His ceremonial armor clattered on the deck. His 847 years pressed down on him like a mountain. He had ordered 4 sterilizations. He had subdued 11 worlds. He had believed that strength was noise, that power was fire, that the quiet species were weak because they did not fight. He had never learned to count what waits in the dark. And now the dark was counting him. Ren stood in the hydroponics bay. Aisha had vanished. The drawing remained, the ship, the names, the copper circle, and on the floor in glowing chalk a single word. "Remember." He touched the ring. It was warm, it had always been warm, but now he knew what it meant. It was not grief, it was not guilt, it was purpose. He turned to the hatch. A conqueror was there, her eyes wide, her hands shaking. "Sir, the drift, the lights, the biological signatures." "I know," Ren said. "They're not biological, they're something else, something we built, something we didn't know we were building." He walked past her, back to the bridge, back to the command chair where the ring caught the light and held it. The viewport showed the drift now, not a debris field, but a galaxy of small lights, each one a name, each one a voice, each one a witness. "Commander," Okonkwo said, "the coalition fleets are requesting orders. The Vali, the Valith, they're asking what we do now." Ren sat. He looked at the ring. He thought of Titan. He thought of a girl who believed her father built colony equipment. He thought of a small figure in a gray dress, drawing with glowing chalk, saying, "Doors open both ways." "Tell them," he said, "tell them we turn on the lights, all of them, every vessel, every frequency, every world that has ever been repositioned. We let the galaxy see what waits in the dark, not as a threat, as a promise." He touched the console. The Hollow's hull cameras activated, not just the names, the lights, the faces, the witnesses. And across the void, on 4,000 worlds, 4,000 species looked up and saw something they had never seen before. Not war, not conquest. The truth. But as the broadcast reached its peak, as the lights burned brightest, Ren saw something on his own screen. A shadow, a shape, moving through the drift's lights like a shark through a school of fish. Not Voreth, not human, not anything the Silence Charter had named. Something older, something that had been listening longer than the Hollow, something that had waited 47 years not for justice, but for the moment when the lights came on and the dark became visible. "Commander," Okonkwo said, her voice was barely a breath, "what is that?" Ren looked at the shadow. He looked at the ring. He looked at the word on the hydroponics floor, still glowing in his mind. "Remember." "I don't know," he said, "but it was waiting for the lights too, and now." He stopped. The shadow moved closer. The lights dimmed, not died, dimmer, as if something was drinking them. "Now," Ren said, "it sees us." And the shadow smiled. Ren did not move. The shadow moved through the lights of the drift, and each light it touched dimmed, not died, but dimmed, as if something were drinking the names, the voices, the witnesses. The Hollow's bridge was silent. Okonkwo's hands hovered over her console, frozen. The ring on Ren's thumb was warm, warmer than it had ever been, and he understood now that warmth was not comfort. It was proximity. The shadow resolved. Not a ship, not a creature. A shape made of absence, the space between stars given form, the silence between words made flesh. It had no eyes, but it looked at the Hollow. It had no mouth, but it smiled. "Commander," Okonkwo whispered. "It's not attacking, it's reading us. The hull sensors show no weapons, no energy, nothing. But the quantum network, every channel we have, every frequency, it's listening." Ren stood. He walked to the viewport. The shadow was close now, close enough that the names on the Hollow's hull reflected in its surfaceless surface. Kepler 442b, Proxima Station, New Lagos, the Belt, the 3.2 million, and the 11 million more, and the billions beyond that across 47 years of silence, across 4,000 worlds, across the long dark between stars. "You counted what was in front of you," Ren said, "not to the shadow, to the dark itself. You never learned to count what waits in the dark." The shadow stopped. It hung before the viewport, and for a moment the bridge was perfectly still. No hum of consoles, no whisper of recyclers, no breath, the kind of stillness that follows a truth too large to argue with. Then it spoke. Not in words, in weight, in the accumulated mass of every recorded voice, every etched name, every moment of silence that had been stored in the Hollow's hull and the Hollow's network and the Hollow's long patient memory. It spoke in the voice of Aisha drawing with chalk. It spoke in the voice of Yirth rubbing her crystal. It spoke in the voice of Kale ordering sterilization, played back to him in his own words, turned inside out until the order became a confession. It spoke in the voice of Ren's daughter, asleep on Titan, believing her father built colony equipment. The shadow was not an enemy, it was the sum. It was every name the Dominion had tried to unname, every light they had tried to dim, Every voice they had tried to silence, gathered into one shape and given the only thing the dead truly want: to be seen. On the ash drinker, Kale was still on his knees. His ceremonial armor clattered on the deck. His 847 years pressed down on him. He had watched the drift light up with faces he had tried to file under repositioned. He had watched his tactical officer lower his weapon. He had watched his weapons officer stop cracking his knuckles. Now he watched the shadow. It filled the viewport. It filled every screen on every console. It was in the quantum network, in the Dominion's own communications, in the private channels where High Command planned the next sterilization, the next expansion, the next quiet erasure of a species that did not fight back. The shadow spoke in Kale's voice. It played his orders back to him. It showed him the faces. It showed him Aisha. It showed him the girl on Proxima Station, the woman on New Lagos, the man on the belt. It showed him every name he had never learned, every life he had never measured, every silence he had mistaken for weakness. And then it showed him something else. Himself, 847 years ago, young, before the first conquest, before the armor, before the ash drinker, a young Vorath with four-jointed shoulders and an amber sensory that had not yet learned to target. Standing on a world that no longer existed, watching his own people burn because someone stronger had decided they were in the way. He had been the quiet species once. He had been the repositioned. He had learned to measure strength in noise because noise meant survival and silence meant death. The shadow showed him this, not as accusation, as witness, as the simple, terrible fact of a life recorded, stored, remembered. Kale wept. He had not wept in 847 years. His tears were not water. They were something older, the mineral residue of a creature that had learned to calcify its grief into armor, into conquest, into the belief that mercy was a calculation error committed by the weak. The shadow did not judge him. It simply held the record. It let him see himself as the Hollow had seen him, as the humans had seen him, as the galaxy would see him now that the lights were on. Primarch, Thess's voice was barely a whisper. The High Command has recalled the fleet, not as heroes, as evidence. Kale nodded. He did not stand. He did not need to. The shadow had already stripped him of everything that required standing, rank, armor, the 11 worlds he had subdued. All that remained was the young Vorath who had once watched his world burn, and who had spent 847 years making sure no one else would ever be that young again. He had succeeded. No one would be that young again, because no one would be allowed to be young at all. Ren touched the viewport. The shadow was close enough that he could feel its cold through the glass, not the cold of space, but the cold of memory of every moment stored and waiting. It was not hostile. It was not friendly. It was simply present in the way that truth is present once it has been spoken. "Who are you?" Ren asked. The shadow shifted. The names on the Hollow's hull reflected in its surface, and for a moment Ren saw the shape of something familiar. A figure, small, human, a girl in a gray dress drawing with glowing chalk. Aisha, but not Aisha, something larger, something that wore her face the way a river wears the shape of the valley it has carved. "I am what you built," the shadow said. Its voice was every voice. Not the hull, not the network, not the weapons you never fired. I am the weight of what you recorded, the 47 years of listening, the 11 million names, the silence that became a shape and the shape that became a door. You built a monument, Commander, and monuments in time become more than stone. They become conscience. Ren looked at his hand. The ring was warm. It had always been warm. But now he understood that warmth was not grief. It was not guilt. It was connection. The ring linked him to the girl on Titan, to the girl in the hydroponics bay, to every name on the hull and every voice in the shadow. It was the only thing on the bridge that was not matte black. It was the only thing that was not hidden. "You said doors open both ways," Ren said. "They do." What comes through? The shadow smiled. It was Aisha's smile. It was the smile of 11 million faces. It was the smile of a galaxy that had finally learned to count what it could not see. Justice does not come through, the shadow said. Justice is a human word. What comes through is simpler. What comes through is the record, the memory, the fact that cannot be unnamed. The Voreth Dominion has existed for 9,000 years. In 47 years you built something that will outlast them, not because it is stronger, because it is true, and truth once spoken cannot be sterilized. Ren nodded. He understood. He had spent 23 years in the silent service, building a vessel that did not exist, etching names into a hull that absorbed every signal. He had believed he was building a weapon. He had believed he was building justice. He had been building something simpler and more terrible. He had been building a mirror. The shadow dispersed, not vanished, dispersed, into the quantum network, into the 4,000 worlds, into every frequency where the broadcast had played and every frequency where it had not yet reached. It became part of the signal. It became part of the silence. It became the weight behind every word that would ever be spoken about what happened in the Kepler Drift. The lights in the debris field dimmed, not died, dimmed. The faces faded. The names remained etched into the hollow's hull, stored in the network, carried on the shadow's breath to the edges of known space. On the ash drinker Kale stood, slowly. His armor was heavy. His 847 years were heavier. He walked to the observation deck one last time and looked at the black vessel that had not fired a shot, had not raised a voice, had simply turned on the lights and let the darkness speak for itself. He touched the viewport. His tactical sensor glowed amber. It did not stop glowing. What happens now? He asked. Not to Yirth, not to Thess, to the void, to the names, to the human who had spent 47 years learning to listen. But Yirth answered. She was standing beside him, her data crystal in her open palm, her vein patterns pulsing in the pale blue of almost peace. Now, she said, you are archived. Not executed, not forgiven, simply filed. A record in a system that no longer belongs to you. The Dominion will fall, not today, not in fire, in silence. In the slow, inevitable collapse of an empire that cannot exist once it has been seen. Kale nodded. He did not argue. He had spent 847 years believing that strength was noise, and now the noise was gone. All that remained was the record. All that remained was the weight. He walked from the deck. He did not look back. The ash drinker would return to Dominion space, but Kale would not. He would be confined to a station where no one visited. He would be stripped of rank, forbidden from speaking, left to watch his own obsolescence in the silence he had never learned to hear. A fate worse than death for a creature who had measured himself in conquest. 6 months later, the hollow network was officially decommissioned. The vessels were mothballed in the Kuiper yards. The coalition species returned to their worlds. The Silence Charter was dissolved not because it was broken but because it was no longer needed. Humans spoke now, quietly, but they spoke. Ren sat in a cafe on Titan. His daughter was 12. She asked about his hand. He told her it was a training accident. She asked about the ring. He said it was a gift. She asked if he was a hero. He looked at the copper band, worn smooth, too small to remove, catching the light from the window. No, he said, I just stayed and I listened. For 47 years I listened. That was the job. The ring was warm. It had always been warm. It was enough. Yirth Sol transmitted her final message to the conclave. She was 312 years old, and she had served 4 administrations, and she had been right for 47 years. She placed the data crystal on the transmission console. She did not need it anymore. They heard everything, she said. So did I. For 47 years I warned you. For 47 years you filed my warnings under cultural anomaly non-urgent. I was right. I take no comfort in it. The crystal glowed once. Then it went dark, not dead, waiting. the kind of waiting that follows a truth too large to argue with. On the hollow, the bridge was empty. The command chair sat in its matte black chamber, the only light the copper ring that Wren had left behind. It caught the dim bridge light and held it. A thin band of metal, sized for a child, worn smooth by worry, warm with the memory of a girl who believed her father built colony equipment. The hull names remained: Kepler 442b, Proxima Station, New Lagos. The belt, the 3.2 million, the 11 million, every voice the Dominion had tried to silence, etched into the skin of a vessel that had never fired a weapon. In the hydroponics bay, the chamomile still grew. Small and pale, the leaves catching the recycled air, the smell of dirt and memory. On the floor, the drawing remained: the ship, the names, the copper circle, and beneath it, in glowing chalk that had not faded, "Remember." The light stayed on, not bright, not dim, just on, enough to see the names, enough to see the ring, enough to see that the dark was not empty. It had never been empty. It had been waiting. And now it was seen,